This is Linux Unplugged, episode 11 for October 22nd, 2013. Everyone, and welcome to Linux Unplugged, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Linux talk show that's writing checks our mouth can't cash, but we push on anyways. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey there, Matt. Episode 11, buddy. Look at us.
Already.
All in a row, too. Now, who knows? Because we're coming up to those wily holidays. You never know what could happen.
This is true.
So people have to prepare themselves now. So coming up on this week's show of Unplugged, I want to talk about something that's been bothering me for at least a year. In fact, since November of 2012. To tell you the truth. I could tell you exactly when, but as the Linux Action Show has gone on, we have gotten a really good snapshot of what the Linux news looks like every single week for over the last 7 years. And there's been a change in tone, in quality, in amount, all of it. Linux news has gone bankrupt. And I want to talk about it on today's Linux Unplugged, because I think it's something that, because open source is done in the open, because it is such a community effort, I believe the dialogue around open source plays an extremely critical role in future development and in perception. And then that plays into participation and all these things. So I think it has very, very large and wide-reaching ramifications. So I'll talk about that today. But you know, Matt,
yes,
as is tradition, because this is a very community-involved show, I want to get into the follow-up. And a couple of things.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh, yes. Let the beatings begin.
I know. You know, the Linux Gamecast, they call this section the hate mail. We do have a little hate mail today, but first I want to correct... Oh, actually, first I want to do a thank you. So let's start off on a positive note.
All right.
Integros. In fact, the good folks over at Integros came out in full force to reach out after we talked about them in the Spotlight last on Sunday on the Linux Action Show. We had a visitor in our subreddit who answered some technical questions and also corrected a mistake I made. Their installer looks a lot like Ubiquiti from Ubuntu's installer, but it is actually their own custom-done installer.
Oh, it is custom. That's fantastic.
And okay. You know, to defend myself, I made that assumption because I drilled into the GitHub repo for their distro, went into the installer code, and I saw references to ubiquiti.sh and a screenshots folder that had Xubuntu screenshots in it. So I thought there's a good chance this is based on Ubiquiti because it looks like Ubiquiti. There's Ubiquiti names in here, but the developer said, well, we were just pulling in different bits of code to try different things out, and we're in the process of cleaning things up.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that makes more sense then.
So I just wanted to make that correction, then also a big thank you, because then also I was contacted on our IRC server. If you go to irc.geekshed.net, that's our IRC server, and then # Jupiter Broadcasting is the room. Alex from Integros reached out to me and answered a few questions I had, talked about a few upcoming things they have, provided me with an example. In fact, I think I have it right here. Let's see if this plays, because I have.
Anteros.
That's how you're supposed to say it. He generated that for us. How cool is that?
That is cool, because I'm going to literally play that. Every time I have to say it, I'm just going to hit that button.
Yeah, Integros. So I wanted to say a special thank you to them.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Integros is... it's a distro that's essentially straight up Arch. They pull from the Arch repos. They have a small repo of their own where they pull certain things in, like art and other things. They set up a very minimal set of defaults. I mean, super minimal. Like, I don't even think there's like a video player installed. And as it installs, it pulls down packages from the Arch repo. And if you want to try out like Cinnamon 2.0 or GNOME 3.10.1, it's a great way to go, because you can be up and running. Now, a lot of people have had some hardware issues, but they're working on new features, so we'll keep an eye on it.
It looks really promising. I know I'm going to be checking into it.
Yeah, it's cool of them to reach out too like that. They definitely went the extra mile. And then one other thing, you know, we did a review, just a few corrections from last. We did a review of the Synology Disk Station 4-bay network attached storage, the DS412 Plus.
Oh yes.
And I gave it a pretty glowing thumbs up all in all. If you want to pay a premium for a small, silent, sort of pre-done appliance.
Basically awesome in a box.
I really liked it, man. I mean, in fact, I bought one on Monday. So I bought one yesterday.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Nice.
I did. I just went ahead and I said, I'm going to buy it. And so I did. Now, however, there is one thing that I totally forgot to mention, and it's probably my main con, is it uses an external power supply. And on top of that, it's got a real funky, proprietary power adapter.
Oh, does it? Okay. So that could make replacing it interesting.
Sure. Now, to be honest, in this rig, I would actually suspect that the number one thing to fail would either be a fan or the power supply. And if it was the power supply and it's integrated, that kind of, is more of a pain in the butt. Whereas if it's an external brick, you just replace that brick. I don't like that the connector's proprietary, but I bet you I could buy an extra one and have it in a drawer. And if it ever popped on me, I bet I could just swap it out real quick. So
I like the idea of having a spare. I think that's a wise idea, and I think you're right. I think the fan would be probably the next thing to go, or even either or. Sure.
And then it was pointed out on our subreddit that in fact, let me go look for it because they have I didn't even know this because I was never really going down the route of looking at a Synology NAS until I was offered to review one. Their 5-drive unit, 5 drives, huh? How about that? It has a built-in power supply. So if you want to go that route, it has the plug, and then you don't have to have that external adapter. But it's like $100 more.
Right. Oh, that's a good-looking machine.
Yeah, they also have a $200 version that's a 2-drive unit or like a $300 unit.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it has all the same features as the one I have, but it's a few $100s cheaper because it only takes 2 drive. And if you just want a nice, fast network-attached storage with some mirrors that runs Linux, that'd be a good way to go. I have it linked in last week's Linux Action Show. Just do me a favor and click that link so that way we get credit.
Yeah, right. No kidding. And I got to ask, I wonder if it has all the same functionality and features you were showing off in the web
believe
guide.
it has the same OS and everything. Yeah.
Ooh, I like it.
Right, yeah. All right, so now you ready for my hate mail's coming up. Your hate mail's first. You ready?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's get it
Brace yourself. All right, so John writes in. He says, "Greetings, Chris and Matt. One of the common things I hear from Matt is if you don't like a distro, use something else, which always makes me cringe just a little. I realize that he's addressing the functional aspect of a distro, but I think the relational aspect is also very important. As Chris said recently, Linux distros are a type of art, and they're an evolving art, kind of like a movie franchise. So Ubuntu doing something stupid is a bit like Hollywood bastardizing some franchise that you loved with an unnecessary reboot. But it being told, why don't you care? Just don't watch it. Sort of, I guess, maybe like the new Star Trek series. Part of being in the Linux community to me is having some kind of attachment, as hobbies often have. For me personally, I'm aware that if Ubuntu does something I don't like, I can hop to another distro. But hearing it as the first response to a criticism sounds like just giving Ubuntu a free pass. Just my 2 cents. Thanks for the shows and keep up the good work. Not Brian T.
I think it's a valid point in that. Well, first, I would actually clarify one thing, that just because I say don't use it doesn't mean I think it's awesome or that I'm acknowledging that I think it's something we should just overlook or excuse.
Right.
I'm simply pointing out factually, and I'm going to throw out another one. It's going to irritate you guys. If you ever tried to herd cats, it doesn't
Wait, did
work.
I just call up John O'Bacon? What's going on over here?
But yeah, no, seriously, if you ever try and herd cats, there's certain limitations to what you can do. The same thing with distributions and the people that design them and run them. You have limited control, and so you have a choice. You can either focus on that negativity, or you can say, "Wow, I'm not really into this, so I'm going to go participate in something that I am into." It legitimately comes down to that.
I hate to play this card, but I think it's also the perspective of somebody who's got a few years on not Brian T. Like, because as you start to get a little, in your mid-30s, you start to think, God, I have a limited amount of even energy to devote to anything, right?
Now, in my 20s, I would have been probably right there with him with a sign in my hand. I could totally see myself doing that.
However, at the same time, I also acknowledge I don't like when I have issues with the new Star Trek movie, I would not want to be told, well, just don't watch it. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Star Trek, it's Star Trek. You don't understand. Like, that would be my response, right? So I do see where he's coming from on that. And I guess, it's almost not healthy, though. It's almost not healthy to place your personal self-happiness onto an external entity like that.
That's basically my message, in that I'm not discounting the fact that you shouldn't be bothered or even upset by something that is bugging you. I mean, I'm not saying that, but you really have X amount of energy to exhaust in a day, and you really got to look at where you're putting that. If it was me and I'm really bent out of shape about what Ubuntu is doing, by God, I'm going to put some effort into another distribution that I can get excited about and make it better than the thing that I have a problem with, if I can. and that's just me, and I guess everybody's mileage is going to vary to that. But I think he brings up a valid point because it's a valid concern that he has, and so I want to address that head on and let him know that
it's interesting.
Don't see it changing, but it's how I come from.
Because what you're also doing when you say that is you're reminding us that Linux is not Ubuntu, or Linux is not Fedora, Linux is not Unity, it's not GNOME, it's a lot of things.
Be part of the market that helps decide what the direction of popularity is going to go.
And that was kind of the message of last week's episode.
Yeah, it really was. So I definitely wouldn't poo-poo his point, because I think it's a valid point. But age definitely plays a part into it. The way I look at life compared to, like in my 20s compared to now at 40, just there's a lot of factors. But I truly am trying very hard to remove as much negativity out of my life as I can. Yeah. And that's part of that process.
Yeah, and it is sort of like if something, and there is also sort of a zenness to if something's bothering you, stop doing it. It's like that age-old story. Like every time I go to the doctor and I do this, hey doc, every time I move my leg like this, it hurts, and the doctor says, well, stop moving your leg like that.
Exactly. Well, Bob Newhart on Mad TV, where he was doing therapy, and the entire therapy session he'd lean in real close and scream, "Stop it!" to whoever was complaining about whatever was ailing them, and that's really what it is.
Yeah, it is.
It really is that simple. But all
right, are you ready for my hate mail now?
Oh yeah, that's good. Yep.
This actually, it's probably more so the next one is actually more directed at me, but this one starts with a name that's kind of hard. So Adnan, A-D-N-A-N, Adnan.
Okay.
Let's go with Adnan. Sure. He says, "Hey guys, in last week's episode of the Ubuntu 13.10 review, you talked a lot about rolling releases and how you missed that factor of innovation, latest features from Ubuntu, especially from the last couple of releases, and how you found your peace of mind in a rolling release such as Arch Linux." Now, I went with this one because we got a lot of emails about rolling release statements, and I think maybe I came off as like, you could only use rolling release, and if you don't
like rolling releases, go to hell, or there's something wrong with you, or whatever.
And what my argument was supposed to be was, if you are technically comfortable, you can be part of pushing the open source envelope forward by perhaps rolling on something a little more cutting edge, a little more rolling. But it doesn't work for everybody. However, I don't know. I didn't get that point across very well. And Adnan here points out that one thing we don't really ever mention is the elephant in the room, and that is Debian. I kind of feel like we do, but I wanted to give an honorable mention here. He says Debian Testing, specifically the Jessie version, and Unstable SID, which neither of is rolling in a full meaning of that word, but yet both branches still get rolling release model where software is continually being developed and updated. Thus, why couldn't Debian Jessie be everyone's perfect rolling release, with its actual rolling release until it becomes stable, quote unquote? If you think about it, Ubuntu became a rolling model of, so he goes on to say that that's essentially what Ubuntu did, and he says that, Jessie can be a bleeding edge distro. Mentioning the 7.2 release in the last episode was a very nice gesture, but I'm sending this email as a plea to provide your audience with more information and awareness about Debian. As perfectly portrayed from examples I used above, Debian seems to be left out, even though it provides us all with the functionality and features. Please inform me if you have any other questions or comments. Adnan.
I'm going to actually agree with him on that. We don't talk about Debian enough. I will actually completely agree with that. Myself especially, I'd say I'm probably the biggest guilty party on that one, because we dance around Debian by talking about all the derivatives. Yeah. But we don't really talk about Debian specifically and its advantages and disadvantages.
My wife and I talk about the dishwasher a lot more than we talk about the foundation of my house.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But as a standalone distro, Debian does have a little something to offer for those that want to go that route.
Yeah.
That being said, we're not going to make an ongoing show about it. That's not possible.
The Debian action show.
Yeah. So I think what we did just there really, nails it. I mean, it's like this is an option you guys should check out.
Yeah.
If you want an Ubuntu-like experience without the Ubuntu, give it a whirl.
Ubuntu, Debian is sort of. It's unbelievable in the sense that, so when I really first started cutting my teeth on Linux, I worked at a school district, and they have run systems. It's like I guess what I'm trying to say is their IT department for a little bit for me was like a time capsule, because I went back 10 years later, kind of like a reunion at the time of my high school reunion, but instead I was going back to that job to contract for 3 months.
Right.
And I opened up the time capsule, and what I found was Debian systems that we had deployed that had just recently either been retired or about to be retired, but had been updated throughout the years and continued to run. I mean, it was really like if you could do a long-term science experiment as an IT guy, where you just got grant funding to study something for 10 years, it was like that for me. I was like, holy crap, here it is. In reality, here is,
Exactly.
the honest to God goodness of Debian just lasting this entire time. It was pretty cool.
So I think the long and short of it is that Debian is a great option if you want something that you can install and honestly not think about ever again. That's really it,
Totally. Yep. I'm going to give you a ding for that, Matt, because I agree. So now this next one. Also, another point that was made is by a few folks was that folks in development shops, rolling releases are no good because if like an enterprise, when you write software and then you certify it as something and then you go to ship it, but the libraries change or something like that, that's a total, pulling the rug out from underneath the developers. So they like to have, totally snapshotted in time systems. Although technologies like Docker are alleviating, so that's the other thing about this rolling release discussion is there are new technologies coming out like not even coming out, like virtualization with snapshots and Docker and containers that sort of nullify some of the previous pains with rolling releases. And we'll just see where that goes. I wonder if history won't prove me right in the long run because of these types of things where you can isolate applications off into a safe environment.
I think so. I think as things evolve with the virtualization technologies specifically, I think we'll eventually hit that point to where it becomes a moot issue. But I'm not sure we're there yet. I think there's still enough considerations that people need to really make an educated decision.
So Jesse writes in, he says, hello, Chris and Matt. I saw your recent Linux Unplugged episode on your opinion about Ubuntu going to a rolling release, only I have to completely disagree with all your points. Last year, I switched a few of my teachers to Linux Mint, and most of us Linux Mint and Ubuntu users don't know enough to fix our system if it crashed from an update in a release. Now, you remember one of the things I said is there is this fear of, like, I need my distro master to protect me. And if I don't have the grand repo keeper checking every package before it hits the repo, then disaster is around the next update. Anyway,
and I actually agreed on that whole point of it. Well, I'll get to that after the.
No, go ahead. You can.
I was just going to basically point out. I said, to be completely fair, though, I actually pointed out that it is different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, right.
There are use case scenarios to where it does not make sense to go rolling release.
Where Jesse's making the case right here. He says most new Linux users don't want to spend time tweaking their computer to run the way they like. Most of them just install the distro and move over their data. I hate doing this unless I'm re-Linuxing, remastering. Ubuntu is aiming for a noobish user base, and rolling release would just turn them off. It seems that you also forgot that corporate distros helped Linux get off the ground in the 90s. I personally don't care about pushing the envelope unless it's base packages. Also, I'm not very savvy, and most Linux users are not either. So where he says here that I hate where Ubuntu is aiming for a noobish user base, I see people that take offense to that sometimes, but I do agree they're trying to do a wide spectrum.
They are doing a wide spectrum, and also the whole corporate thing. The corporate stuff, while I agree that it's an ancient thing, a lot of people are using the long-term releases for that. Yeah. So that's a completely out of the argument already off the bat.
I think too, you couldn't you would. I think the best approach is sort of the Debian and OpenSUSE approaches, where you have here's your stable branch and here's your rolling branch.
And that's really what I would want. I mean, that's really how I think they should do it. I think that absolutely, however they do a stable branch is up to them and however they make that work with the community. But have a stable branch, schools, corporations, nonprofits, whatnot, or people just don't want something to update all the time. And then, of course, if you want a rolling release, that's available as well. And that, of course, will then help with speedier development and less of the release party and more of just getting it done.
All right. Now watch out, Matt, because now the flamethrowers are fully focused on me. Ben writes in, he says, "Hey, Chris, I love all the shows at Jupiter Broadcasting, but during the segment in episode 10 of Linux Unplugged, you said you believe Valve SteamOS is a sign of them not having confidence in Ubuntu as a desktop platform. One thing I noticed that no one mentioned is that SteamOS isn't necessarily meant for desktop markets. I'm pretty sure the point of SteamOS is making an operating system that's optimized for TV and controller, in addition for the desktop. Valve probably just wants to provide users and OEMs an image that they can throw onto boxes that start right up into big picture mode without the overhead of a normal desktop OS. Anyways, thanks for all the great shows, Ben." Now, we got a lot of emails to this that a lot of people did not agree that, in fact, here was another one. Michael wrote and he said, "In the last show, you voiced an opinion that Valve's decision to create SteamOS was caused by a concern or lack of faith in Ubuntu. I think we should look at it from Valve's perspective. Why should they say their new console will be running Ubuntu, even if it will? It will not have an Ubuntu user interface. It will be a console. You will get Steam Big Picture interface and won't be encouraged to tweak with it. For all purposes, consoles should be a black box to you. There's no reason for telling anyone it's running Ubuntu. Saying SteamOS is also better from a marketing point of view. It sounds like something they created and tailored for their console. To sum up, I don't think Valve's move was a vote of no confidence for Ubuntu, but rather marketing PR decision with a goal of creating a brand with a product without causing confusion about the real nature of the OS. Thanks for the great work, Michael.
Well, two considerations there. One, as far as the branding and whatnot, that's easily done with an Ubuntu base. A simple letter from the Ubuntu developers and basically removing all the trademark material and going with what you want. That's already doable with an Ubuntu base, so I don't think that's the whole reason behind it. I think really it comes down to a fact that by hedging their bets a little bit, taking a Linux Mint approach like they are with the Linux Mint Debian edition, by hedging their bets and spreading out things a bit, they're not centralized on Ubuntu only. That's just common sense.
Right.
Granted, the branding thing is accurate. I mean, I agree, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's a dangerous place to be.
So I think, my point to that was like if Canonical had been successful and had really driven the Ubuntu desktop and as a brand and all that had broken through, it would be a benefit to say we run on Ubuntu, right? It would be like a perk. It would be like a good thing, like runs on Windows, right?
Sure.
And because that never happened, it was sort of almost better to just sweep the whole Ubuntu thing under the rug. I agree, though, that at most, that's probably a minor factor in the decision process. Overall, it's about branding. It's about streamlining. It's about keeping, it's about reducing confusion. So I do agree. I thought about that after I said it, and I thought, well, actually, there's a few arguments against it, so I was glad to see some folks wrote in with that. So thanks to you guys. Now, our last email, which is going to kind of, in a way, kick us into our main topic today.
Oh, cool.
Comes from Matt, but it's a different Matt. But he does have two T's like a gentleman. He writes, first, hey guys, I just want to correct Chris on something he said on last. Linux is not the only open source community. Because obviously I think that. A lot of the BSD code is open source as well, but isn't free software by the definition of the term that was created by RMS.
It's negative in the freedom dimension.
But his main point was, secondly, I've recently become more involved with the BSD community, and they really don't have the types of issues that the Linux community does with egotistical people talking to blogs and writing something stupid that pisses everyone off.
I actually agree with this.
I wonder if this isn't the time that the Linux community as a whole just says these quote-unquote founders something like, hey, we get that you've done a lot in the past, but now you're part of the problem, and you're not solving anything. So please accept this pat on the back and this heartfelt thanks and go away until you can accept that this thing you created is much bigger than your ego. I just think people like RMS and Mark Shuttleworth are constantly causing severe divisions in the wider community. And they've reached a point where their contributions don't outweigh the harm they're causing by creating scenarios where the community attacks itself.
I look at it like a very hyperactive family. There's a lot of debating going on, and even arguing, and and some But it doesn't mean we stop being a family because of it. And I think that's really what happens.
Oh, gosh, that makes me feel so warm.
Yeah, it's like a warm and fuzzy feeling, right?
I almost feel like I don't want to even say what I think, because mine is like, we're all, okay, so here's what I think. I think if you really believe the BSD community doesn't have arguments and big fights, you're fooling yourself.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
What it is it goes back to what I said during the intro. It is our bankrupt media coverage of Linux, because it is easy to write about the cult of personality that we have, because it draws clicks, people recognize the name, people click on the links and read the articles. When Mark Shuttleworth or Linus Torvalds or RMS's name is in the headline, I do it too. I'm a dumb monkey. I click it. I read it. And that's why it happens. Now, when somebody in the BSD community does it, you'll hear about it on BSD Now, right? Because that's the media coverage for BSD. And obviously, there's also the BSD Talk and other and the BSD blogs, but like there's not the scale. And now industry is maybe not as a strong term, but definitely there is a forming industry of Linux coverage. And these people are doing a disservice to the community because they're lazy and because they're cheap and because you click it. And because of that, these types of things get extraordinary coverage compared to, for example, today. Aaron Saigo wrote up a long blog post with lots of screenshots about the future direction of a content delivery platform that's more than an app store. It's like music and apps and books and open source code delivery and commercial software delivery that they want to integrate in with like Plasma Active and the KDE desktop, and they've got this whole back-end infrastructure for it that's totally brilliant. They've got a front end, they've got code they've been working on for the front end delivery for 2 years. And like he just wrote up all about it. It's like it's going to be fundamental plumbing for app distributions for like distro agnostic. It's going to be brilliant. And nobody wrote about it. Nobody wrote about it because everybody's writing about crap.
Yeah, and I can tell you why. As someone that's in this market, is because quite honestly, unless it's going directly into a subscribed mailing list, no one's going to click it. No, that's not fair. Most people won't click it. The smart people will, but most people that are just scaling through titles, it's not necessarily going to grab your attention unless it was done really, really well. I mean, like we're talking Star Wars type titles. It's got to be really good, and that's hard to do, especially with something like that because it covers so much ground.
Right,
and it doesn't have the click-through rate of here's the top 10 reasons why you're sick of reading these articles.
Well, so
that sort of thing.
Lass has a 7+ year history of following the news. You've been a writer for years and writing in this space. So I want to talk about this today because this is something that has literally been bothering me for really more than a year, but definitely for the last year. But first, I want to tell everybody about something great. So let's just focus on the good stuff, cool. And that is this week's sponsor, Ting.com. That's right, friends. Ting is mobile that makes sense. Now, there are millions of reasons to switch to Ting. So I want to tell you about just a few of them this episode. Number one, no contracts, no early termination fees. And here's the third one. Brace yourselves. Pay for what you use. Pay for what you use. In the past, the only way to do pay for what you use is if you had some sort of super special deal with some monopoly carrier through your company. If you ever left your job or that deal ended, there went your sweet deal. No, Ting lets you take that power into your own hands, literally. So if you go to linux.ting.com, you're going to take $25 off your first month of service or your first device. Lots of devices you can bring. If you go over to the Ting Help blog, the Ting Help page, you can find out what devices you can bring. They also have a concierge service, so you can get onto Ting with your own device, with a device they find for you, or a brand new device that you own outright. Now, on top of the pay for what you use, on top of their excellent customer service, when you call 1-855-846-4389 and a real Canadian answers the phone, on top of all of that, they also have built-in hotspot and tethering with every device you grab. So if you need Wi-Fi for a group of folks, and if you're on one of these other carriers, you've got that checkbox if they haven't removed it. You've got that checkbox in your Android settings, and man, you just wish you could just check that box and wouldn't have to pay anything extra. But they'll get you. Maybe you got to get the family share plan, like I had to get a long time ago. It's so ridiculous. Yeah. Ting eliminates all of that. They eliminate all of that. Plus, they have a savings calculator. If you're kind of on the fence, you go to Ting.com, click on that savings calculator, put your bill information in there, and then just look at the raw savings. Now, consider this. Ting is making it better than ever to switch. Not only do they have the golden ticket program right now, this is only to the end of October, so it's almost over, where they're giving out 6 tickets for a year of service for Ting. Even if you bring your own device, you can still get one of these. They also have introduced their early termination relief program, where they'll give you up to $75 per line that you have to cancel to switch to Ting. Now we're really starting to talk here, because if you're like me, I think the highest bill I've ever had, my highest bill even when both Ange and I were on it was like $24. $25.
Yeah, that's crazy.
She and I are both big data. Like we text, we do the web, but we don't do a ton of phone. But if I did a ton of phone one month, then I'll only pay for what I use. I don't end up paying into some plan, if you can call it that. I don't know why they call it a plan. I didn't plan that. You don't have to pay some huge plan for something you don't end up using. And go over to the Ting devices page, and while you're there, check out their new devices. They got the Moto X. They even got the Windows Phone if you're of that variety. They got the HTC One now with the Android 4.3, which is rocking. And they have the pre-order up for the new Note 3, Matt.
Woo, man, yep. I'm looking at that. I love what I got now, but I would definitely love to go that direction.
And if you wanted to get in, brand new for a crazy, crazy good deal, go check out the Kyocera Kona. 63 bones with our discount.
That's like the perfect backup phone, right? I mean,
Well, so first of all, since you only pay for what you use, put this in the glove box.
Exactly.
Right? Put it in the glove box and let it sit there. And if you ever have an emergency, you've got a phone that's ready to go. Now, not only does this thing have like days of battery life, but it makes crystal clear phone calls. So that's a serious option. They also have used devices. And I want to stress this. Ting has really great customer service. If you want to take advantage of their concierge service to find you a used device, you can do it. But if you want to get in on a Nexus S, check this out. Unlocked, you own it outright with no early termination fees, no contract. Samsung Nexus S with Android 4.1, $245.
Jeez,
and if you got
crazy.
WiMAX in your area, it's going to rock that too. They've also got the Samsung Galaxy S3, which has a little bit less of the Samsung bloatware than the S4. 385 bones, you own it outright, no contract, no early termination fees. What? It's crazy.
Love it.
I know, absolutely. So go over to linux.ting.com, grab yourself something nice, and take advantage of that early termination relief program if you need to, and maybe you'll even get a golden ticket. Yeah, buddy. So thanks to Ting for sponsoring Linux Unplugged.
I mean, how cool is that golden ticket program? That is so cool. When's the last time any other carrier has given you a golden anything? Especially a ticket. You know?
No kidding. No kidding. And I just feel like we need more Willy Wonka out there.
That's right.
Yeah. So the thing I'm calling it the bankrupt news industry around Linux because I feel like I've watched it devolve into crap. We had 3 news stories last week on LAS, right? We had or maybe it was 4. It might have been
4. I mean, they all kind of bled together.
Yeah.
It was just
but the big story was Mark Shuttleworth, branded people that disagree with him, the open source Tea Party. Aaron Seigo took to G+, Lennart Pottering took to G+, to respond. That was the really big story of last week, right? That was sort of like, it got coverage everywhere. It was our top story. And what really upsets me is, and do you know how do you say Bruce, is it Byfield? Bruce Byfield?
Byfield, yeah.
Yeah. Bruce wrote a great piece back in November 8th of 2012, kind of inspired by a post that actually Aaron Seigo had made on his blog. But I really liked Bruce's take on it here. He says he took on what he's calling the cults of personality that often dominate the free software community. And of course, we think of Linus, right? We think of Mark. In fact, huge news, breaking news. Everybody stand by. We all need to stop what we're doing. Linus has insulted Fedora. Did you
I've been waiting for him to. No, I've not. But I've been waiting for him to insult AMD. That's what I'm.
I know, right? Yeah, that's the joke. But that's the joke now as well. Linus puts his middle finger up and people jump.
Right.
But if you look at it, Linus Torvalds goes after the Fedora project this week and calls him stupid. I saw this transpire on G+ in real time. I was on G+ when Linus made the post. I think it even happened before last. And I read it and I went, oh, okay, well, so Linus thinks that Fedora should generate new ISOs periodically. That way, when you grab an ISO, you don't have, super out-of-date packages. I agree with that.
I agree with it. I think really why make a thing about it?
Right.
But whatever.
And then the Fedora project responds, oh, well, once we generate the ISOs, we don't touch them. Those are the snapshot of the release. And then we do updates. And then Linus, jumps back in and says, that's ridiculous. And then they say, well, we don't have QA for the image. Like it was this big back and forth. But I saw the thing and I thought, okay, no big deal, right? Well, no. Turns out, huge deal. Huge deal in the Linux media. Softpedia has an article up. Every news site that pretends to cover Linux has an article up about Linus Torvalds smashing the Fedora project, calls them stupid, right? And it plays into this whole cult of personality. It perpetuates this circle jerk of the celebrities in the Linux community.
Exactly. Well, and so here's the thing. A lot of people have to realize that the cult of personality you see in a lot of the reality TV stuff bleeds through into the written word as well. And so you need something to basically scrape together to make these news stories out of, especially when you're living in a big vacuum of things that don't present themselves well to the masses. They're important instances. There's important things that are happening, but they're not always real easy to throw into a title and guarantee a lot of click-throughs, which of course will then generate revenue. And that's why these things tend to do really well. Note the words in that title. If you want to bring that back up on the screen for a second, the words smash, Linus.
Right.
These are not done. These words are carefully chosen, put together to know. So when you glance at this, even if you don't know who Linus is, the odds are you might actually click through just out of curiosity to see what this Linus Linus guy is smashing.
Right, he's smashing a project. He calls that project stupid.
Definitely.
You know,
so
and plus you get a picture of Linus in there, and what every writer loves, you get a few choice quotes to pull that you put in there, and then you just couch, those quotes around some sort of minimal write-up, and then you get, a few thousand views or whatever he gets for this. And of course, the beauty of this is all you got to do is follow Linus on G+, or, watch Hacker News or something like that. And then it's like a story falls in your lap. It's like Christmas time for the writer. And Bruce tackles this. Bruce says that these cults of personality are contrary to community values, whereas they do untold damage imposing commercial values at the cost of community ones, or dividing the community as those at the center of such cults decide to air their personal grudges in public. Now, he wrote this in 2012. We just saw this happen over just this weekend. He says they can cause people to discard their own judgment and choose software on the basis of who endorses what, and even to compromise themselves morally by choosing sides in a flame war when they should be condemning everyone involved. Now,
and I actually, when I, came in, myself and, of course, the Ubuntu's community manager came in to actually address this when a lot of this stuff was going back and forth, we were instantly attacked. It's like, oh my gosh, this sort of thing. It's unfortunate that we've come to that, because we're feeding the problem and, quite frankly, showing the writers that write this stuff that this is where you need to go. And here's another reason why this is not only going to continue, but it's going to get worse. And a lot of people don't realize this. Because of Google's constant algorithm changes, especially with their latest one, SEO is kind of dying. In my opinion, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so because
Google said they want to kill SEO.
So rather than having reasons why something's awesome or something that has long-term value in SEO, that's basically going the way of the dodo. So it's all or nothing in quick hits. You got to publish often, got to have lots of content. It has to have great titles. Get people in, and it's got to continue.
Right. And the other thing is all of these writers are under big deadlines, and like Bruce points out, the problem is that journalism, as it's practiced today, finds cults of personality to be extremely convenient. Being able to just mention a celebrity in the headline guarantees you get increased page views. That's right. And that, of course, means that the writer is still employed, and, of course, the website remains up and not being sold. He also says it's convenient for the writer because instead of having to go out of their way to back up their facts, if they mention someone famous said it, then it validates their point. Even if the celebrity fails to make a logical argument or offer a scrap of insight, readers are more likely to be swayed by a viewpoint by learning that a celebrity, quote-unquote, supports it. And one of the deciding factors, so I put Plan B on hiatus, even though I think, I'm still very fascinated by Bitcoin. The problem what I saw happening is sort of all of these bankrupt values being translated over to Bitcoin, where people who really had no business being quoted in a legitimate news article were quoted, and people who I knew to be sort of posers, quote unquote, were writing articles talking about how great something was. And I see this all the time. In the history of the Linux Action Show, 7+ years, I have met a lot of the people. I know a lot of the people behind these articles, and I know that some of them never use Linux more than just starting it up on a VM on their Mac, and that is their total extent with Linux. And then they go on to write reviews about, new releases and all of this stuff. And it's totally ungenuine, but it is all about they know how to phrase it. They have a bit of an established audience, and they know how to get people to click on their stuff, and they know how to write vaguely enough that you can't pin them down for not actually having enough experience. And so while the write-up tends to be vapid with very little content, very little actual value, because the state of Linux media coverage is so poor and so weak, it gets play. Exactly. And that's just it. And then you bundle that in with the fact that Linux is kind of coming into its own. We're kind of at a lull right now because the gaming thing already happened. The cloud stuff's already kind of doing its thing. It's not really, something that you can put into easy to understand terms for the masses. So there's a lot of play there for just fluff, and it's going to continue to get worse. I really believe that. He says, Bruce goes on to say that even a writer is not above from stooping to such. However, even when the writer is not stooping to such tactics, like we covered for us, for example, last tries not to get sucked into this, but we covered the Shuttleworth story because we had to. It's news. Like the audience, there is an expectation in the audience that you're going to talk about, especially in that case because we were drawn into it. The Linux Action Show was actually drawn into the discussion, so it was like there's even more impetus to discuss it. But He goes on to say, readers want to hear about what famous people are doing or thinking. They are far less interested in ordinary people, which is why stories about people behind the scenes, while often well-meaning, rarely keep people reading unless the writer can quickly establish an interesting angle. And I think that's also really true. It's like there's sort of this market pressure to play into this whole cult of personalities. But what we get is this really watered down coverage of the open source community where it looks like we're constantly bickering. It looks like we're immature. We can't come together. Even when there's great code being made, there's great strides that are being accomplished. It gets lost in the noise.
Right. That's exactly it. I mean, I remember back in the day where, Bruce could do a really in-depth analysis of GNOME, for example, and really dive in deep. Or I could do some crazy futuristic Futurama think piece, just having fun with here's the existing technology, here's where I think it's going to go, here's some considerations, blah, blah, blah. Something that might actually be possibly entertaining, worth reading. And now we're trapped in this space to where that's no longer possible. And I don't know where that's going to lead.
Yeah.
I've pulled back a lot myself, honestly. So
yeah, I think and you've seen it from both angles where you've told me that people come to me and say, okay, well, Matt, we want you to write about this. And you're like, I'm not really interested in writing about that. Why would you want me to write about that? And so we want another top 10 article, or we want something for our slideshow because we get X amount of ad revenue by the slideshow.
Exactly.
And I feel like here we are now. A year after Bruce wrote that piece that I just read, and it goes on more. I'll have both Aaron and Bruce's piece linked in the show notes. So this week, tuxmachines.org went up for sale.
Yeah, I saw this coming. I actually knew about it.
Phronix.com has been up for sale a couple of times. The H Online is shut down, right? And so what we have here is either A, sites that couldn't make it work, even though they had original content, or B, we have the elimination of some really good writing, like from the H Online. Yeah. And what we get left with is blog spam.
Right.
And what I see happening is I see companies, like Network World and other companies out there that are really just sort of half-heartedly getting involved. Like they have an open source back page where they have people writing for that, just write us something adorable. We'll put it up and maybe it'll get a few upvotes on Reddit and then people will come read it. It's like this total half-assed, half-hearted attempt to cover the industry. Meanwhile, Linux has seen more adoption than we've ever seen in the history of the platform. We have more people using it in terms of mobile, on the cloud, and on the desktop, but yet the writing and coverage of it has never been weaker or poorer. And it is so disappointing to see this happen.
It is. And the other side of it, too, is that you have two types of writers. You have the writer that basically has to get approval for a topic. Usually we present 2 or 3 to the editor, and then one of them selected. And then a lot of times none of them are selected, and we do have to settle for a top 10. Or you have the person who is a syndicated writer, and these are my favorite, the Dvoraks of the world, for a better example, that will go out and because they're so burnt out, they don't care. They're literally just cranking out crap because they're done. They're done. They mentally checked out a long time ago.
They figured out what buttons to push to generate enough links to meet what that site needs to keep them around. And like Big C points out, you see this definitely happen on Slashdot and all the sites. Boy. But it's interesting in all of this, and I think it's some note to keep in perspective. Linux, LWN.net, LinuxWeekly.net, a reader-supported news site dedicating to really producing deep coverage, which I've never found to be exceptionally compelling myself, but totally respect the type of coverage that it is. They're still around. I don't know how they're doing, but I'm pleased they're still around. And I feel like you touched on it. Like what I want as a Linux user and a follower of this industry, and I would want this even if I was 10 times less involved with the Linux community. If I was just following Linux news because I had CentOS servers deployed on my servers at work, I would still want thought-provoking articles that are, deep discussions about things that are going on right now, that are well-done analysis, that go much further beyond just the surface coverage that this top-level coverage we get now. And LWN.net does exactly that. They just don't happen to do it about things that I'm particularly passionate about.
Well, and the other side of that, too, because this is a great example. They're still around because, of course, their expectations are not probably not monetary in any way other than server cost. I'm sure it's volunteer authors and so on and so forth. And I think even, was it opensource.com, I believe now, the Red Hat group, actually they do a lot of volunteer stuff. I think a lot of the volunteer sites tend to do pretty well because the expectation, people are doing it for the fun of it because they're passionate about it, maybe even just to get their name out there. But
Yeah, there are a few efforts.
Yeah,
and
there are a few.
And opensource.com is lucky because they have a benefactor that, Red Hat that
right. But it's all volunteer writers. I mean, these guys are, they're unless it's an employee of the company, but most of them are just volunteer writers. And that's interesting that they're able to produce as well as they do for volunteers, because honestly, once the notoriety wears off as a volunteer, you kind of burn out pretty quick. Because after a while you find that you have X number of hours in the day and you want to spend it elsewhere. So
I think chat room is misinterpreting, so I want to correct because I'm sure some of the listeners. Sure. I don't mean that LWN isn't compelling. I guess what I mean is like I'm never like compelled.
The topics aren't maybe hitting it for you. I mean,
like they're good. Like optimizing CPU hot plug locking is interesting. A new direction for PowerWare scheduling, rationalizing Python packaging.
Pretty hyper specific, yeah.
Yeah, and just not particular topics. I mean, but I probably find myself on the site about once a week, reading something. But I would really like some deeper stuff, and I feel like there are like you just pointed out 2 good examples. OpenSource.com is one of them where there's some that are beginning, but it's still so far, and the resources are still so thin, and the market pressures are so high on this problem. Like, this is a trend that's been going on for a few years now, and I really feel like I've been witnessing the decline as the host of the Linux Action Show, just like watching the news every single week. You and I, we sit here and go, what are we going to cover? And we watch it all week, and then at the end of the week, we literally take it all in and then say, okay, well, this meets the cut. And every single week, that for a while now, like that list is getting shorter and shorter. And in the last couple of weeks, it's been shockingly small. Like, so much so. And unfortunately, the noise ratio hasn't gone down. There's still horrible things being written and posted on the blogs and all these other places. So it's so disappointing to watch it happen.
Well, and I also think it fills in the gap a little bit for the lack of actual news. I mean, we need more, Dell dumps Windows forever and goes nothing but Linux, or, some crazy stories like that, to where it's like really big, compelling stuff like what we saw with Valve and gaming. We need more of that to drown out the noise. Here would be a great example, because ZooX is asking for kind of maybe like an example, is while this whole Shuttleworth kerfuffle is blowing up around Mir and Upstart and Systemd and all these things, wouldn't it be awesome to have like this like New York Times style article with like, here is like the whole backstory, here's all of the stuff, here's when this stuff happened, here's the people behind it, here's their goals, like this whole, like if there was just one spot you could go to and be completely up to date on this whole kerfuffle and like get the timelines right and get the motivations and and have it be impartial, third-party documentation of it. Because really, and I don't mean to toot our own horn right now, but one of the best ways to get that is just to watch the entire back catalog of the Linux Action Show. And then you just organically watch it come together. But that's not how it should be. And because, quite honestly, to get a writer to actually go that deep into something and to do it right, for that article alone, honestly,
I know.
I can't see anyone doing it for less than $1,000.
I know.
Maybe $2,000.
This is the problem. This is the problem. The internet makes things cheap, and people don't, unless you've been involved in the industry, people don't know the actual like.
And $2,000 is probably not enough, honestly, because it's going to be quite a job. So
yeah. So just I don't know. It's just something. I don't know. Maybe if the Mumble Room has any thoughts on this. If you guys have. Maybe you've noticed an improvement in Linux news. If you've noticed a decline in Linux news, if this concerns you guys or doesn't concern you, if anybody has any thoughts and want to chime in before we move on, the floor is open to you to do so.
Right.
Well, to paraphrase the great philosopher of our time, Jessie J, from her infinitely deep poem Price Tag. Again, I'm paraphrasing here.
Okay.
All about the cha-ching, cha-ching. All about the bubbling.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, hey, Linus Torvalds, the term Linus Torvalds hates Fedora gets people a lot more money than Alan Saigo introduces some new piece of technology or something like that.
Right.
You know this better than anybody, both of you, because you're actively into this.
Exactly.
So, and it's all about the bottom line. See, if they don't do this, they get sold and they shut down and they don't have any money. If they do this, they're rolling in dough and everything.
Yeah, that's true. There's so many incentives.
It keeps them in a holding pattern. I mean, really, the writing industry is just hurting as it is. But it does. It keeps them in a holding pattern. If they do get bought out, when they look at which writers to keep and which writers to fire, they look at viewer counts. Really.
What are your thoughts, Matt, on like having to have a certain level of qualification before you're allowed to write. I mean, like not allowed, but like before, like, do you think there's a responsibility for some of these publication companies to like hire qualified writers, or is it if they?
I would say just more the knowledge of the topics themselves.
Okay,
the problem is they spend all their time, and you know, there's a lot of some of the sites you pointed out earlier are great examples of what happens when you hire the guy with the English degree. That's great. He's a fantastic writer. He hasn't a clue what he's talking about, but he writes really well.
Yeah.
I write, I don't know, maybe at an 8th or 9th grade level or whatever. But I know what I'm talking about.
If you know the material, it's more important.
If I know the material, I'm going to at least speak intelligently about it. So,
I agree.
You know.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, because that's a whole other problem. Yeah.
And that's why I have an editor who has the English degree that can then take my mumbo jumbo and make it into something legible. That's what I do. Yeah.
Can I get one of those for real life?
Hey, I got two. My wife does initial edit, and then I have my final editor. But yeah, my wife just takes my stuff and she's just like, she just cringes. She's like, oh God, here we go. So yeah,
that's good. She takes one for the team.
Oh, big time.
I see it's kind of evolving into TV media. How all negative press is all the hoopla, but no actually good miracle stories get coverage.
Right.
It's more American Idol and less Firefly. I mean, really.
Yeah. And you look at that email we got where the guy's like, gosh, it just looks like the Linux community is a bunch of clown shoes.
That's another thing.
See, it's not a Linux thing. It's a human thing. It's a people thing. You see this in the gaming media. You see this in the technology media overall. You see this in regular media. And yeah, this is a human thing. This is a phenomenon that is inherent to, I think, media itself, not just Linux media. We are, at the end of the day, people, and so we want exciting stuff. We want short, sweet, exciting news stories.
Right.
We want small content that can be easily consumed, judged, and then we move on.
And the thing is these sites recognize that and they manipulate us based on that, and so then they end up just producing shovelware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah. And see, it's not about the technical proficiency of the writer or the understanding that the actual journalist has about the topic. It's simply about what people want to hear.
That's true. But the people that want to hear that generally tend to attract that class of writer, though. They attract the one that can write or spin a really great tale, but doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. And, of course, then the market, of course, rewards that. And that's the problem, too.
Yeah. Well, Matt mentioned John C. Dvorak earlier, and that guy can get away with writing just about anything strictly because of his name. He's a well-known writer. Yeah. Everybody knows who he is.
Well, there's also science behind what he does, too. Yeah. No, he's very, very smart.
Yeah, and he knows
exactly what he's doing.
I think anyone that survives in that industry knows. Like, I feel like if I wanted to manipulate our audience all the time, I could, because I think I really know what they all like, and I think I know how to. We could title things, we could cover certain things just strictly to manipulate, and it's like it is. You know what? Actually, I'll even say this: there's sometimes I have to fight the urge, and every now and then you do see it leak out in our titles, where we'll go for a little bit of an outrageous title just to get you to watch, right. Even though we hope that the actual show normalizes it. I've learned that it doesn't. That title sets the expectation when they go in. They then watch it through the filter that title set, and they perceive everything we say through that. And so now I've kind of backed off from doing that. But you know, it can literally, for some of these sites, it could be the difference in thousands of clicks. So it's a hard thing to fight.
Also, another thing is some of these mainstream writers, like, they still think of Linux as just a toy, like something you just play around with. Like, they're like talking down to it almost.
A lot of them are, and a lot of times you also have to follow where their sponsors are coming from. If it's an AdSense sponsor or some network sponsorship situation where it's just rotating ads, you know, usually they're just truly, honestly believing that it's a toy. But if it's actually a purchased in place ad, a lot of times on a lot of these sites, that's by design. A lot of them are mouthpieces for Microsoft and other places, and I can think of a few of them right off the top of my head, actually.
PC World, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Oh, snaps. Well, PC, yeah. I thought, you know, we could name and shame, but there's just, you know.
Let's just say that if they're pretty popular, it's probably safe to say.
Yeah. You know, now we're name and shaming. I'm watching the chat room and they're name and shaming. That's cool. That's cool. All right, guys. Well, any final thoughts? Riley, I thought I saw you piped up with something, but I was going to move on.
Oh,
go ahead.
No, I was just talking about never mind.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right, well, I'm going to read a couple of emails before we run, and then I think, Matt, I'll wrap us up with the RMS Wrap, which debuted on Coda Radio this week. So this email comes in from Roy. He says, "Hi, Chris and Matt. My name is Roy. Said like Roy. I'm from Israel, and I'm a product manager in a software company, a longtime fan of the show, and even longer fan of Ubuntu. I switched to Linux where Ubuntu during 7.04 was the first thing, and it was the first thing I tried out. I'm a longtime fan of Ubuntu as they were the ones that made me realize a user has the options other than Windows, and it was a wonderful experience. At first, when you moved away to Arch and preached others to do so, I don't know if I really preached that.
Shared excitement preached.
Thank you. Shared excitement. It just shared in my experience. It's kind of like, when we start the Coke Action Show, and I share my
Oh my goodness! Hello,
it's the internet, baby. He said I could not turn on Shuttleworth as we were talking about it, but I guess maybe it was the Amazon collaboration that got me. I like Amazon, but I don't like to get results from Amazon and everything that I search in the dash. Anyway, I switched to Arch, and the first thing I have to say is, oh my God, Systemd. As a power user, Arch is easy to learn, and the Arch wiki is wonderful. Then I installed a desktop environment. You talk so much about KDE, so I gave it a try, but I felt it was too broken for my needs. Certain features were missing or perhaps just weren't quite done. But he goes on to say that I switched to GNOME, which has been great. I guess you can say it's more complete than KDE.
It's okay, but whatever you do, never write about GNOME.
Yeah.
That's the best advice I can ever give you.
He says it does work, and it even works smoothly. The only thing missing for me in Arch is a respectable GUI for Pac-Man, as I want to explore the repo in a comfortable way, and there are some ways to integrate with and some way to integrate with the AUR easily. I've installed Yort, but I would rather have something embedded with Pac-Man. Keep up the great work. Now, Matt, on Manjaro, they use a GUI package manager, correct?
Yeah, they call it PacMac or SlapMat or something. I don't know.
I have it on, yeah.
Yeah, PacMac, I think, like a MAC. So
Pac-Man, no, it's Pac-Man XG, right? Isn't that what it is?
No. For the integrated thing, it's like
okay.
PAC, MAC.
Okay. Now, there is a GUI one called like Pac-Man XG, too, which
I actually run that for all my AUR stuff.
Yes, and there is even a Arch Wiki entry about it. And I also, for installing packages from the AUR, I'm sure I'll get some. Whenever you say what you use, by the way, on Arch, just so you know, just brace yourselves for this, Roy. Sure. Whenever you tell people what you use, you will get 30 people telling you not to ever use that. It will destroy Arch. So with that disclaimer made, I use Packer. Packer I like quite a bit. And then you can also, there's a web search for the Arch user repository. And what I really love about that is the comments and the votes. You can use that to kind of suss out if it's workable.
That's right.
Myself, I'm a huge fan of PacAUR.
Okay.
That.
Yep.
It's a really good one. It acts just like Pac-Man, but also works with the AUR.
Yep. And then you can just say like PacAUR-S, capital S, and then the name of the package. And if it's in the actual Arch repo or in the AUR, it don't care. It just gets it. And
exactly.
Nice.
It doesn't prompt you a million times.
Right. Yeah.
So the GUI is definitely Pac-Man XG4.
Okay. Oh,
the
F4.
Manjaro one is Octopi.
Okay.
Octopi.
Yeah, but the ones that I use are two awesome command line AUR interfaces that I found. PacAUR and Packer.
Yeah.
Like a PACKER.
Yeah, I like Packer.
Those two ones are awesome.
Yeah.
I've always just used Yowert.
Yep.
And I want to call it yogurt.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yoplait or something.
It used to be French. Like, it used to be from the French Arch community, and it was only French, and holy smokes, it used to be hard to use back in the day.
We should rename it Activia.
I find that Yowert
right.
prompts me more than Packer does. Not by a lot, but just by a little bit. And I don't know, I just kind of like Packer output a little better, but Yowert's awesome too. In fact, usually that's how I install Packer, is by installing Yowert.
I have a request for the Linux community. If the Linux community could just start naming stuff I can pronounce,
that
would be so awesome.
People were giving GNOME a hard time for calling the music app music and the photos app photos and the file manager files, but now looking back at that, I'm thinking that makes some sense.
Well, even KDE, they just slap a K in front of everything. I mean, I'm good with that.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, and and what they don't is like Dolphin, and that's easy enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, last email comes in from James on the Mir debate. He says, "Hey guys, I just had one point to make which has been overlooked in the discussion over Mir versus Wayland. You were discussing in a different context what, quote-unquote, needed to happen. But I think Mir needed to happen. In 2010, Canonical was first to say they wanted to go with Wayland, but Wayland moved very slowly and was apparently not responsive to Canonical's needs. From Canonical's perspective, Mir needed to happen, perhaps. But surely it's obvious also that Mir gave Wayland a giant kick in the butt. I don't think Wayland would have made anything like the progress it is now without competition from Mir. See, now the Wayland guys really hate it when you say that, especially if you say it on a podcast. They really hate that.
Yeah, and I was the one. That's where the whole monkey suit thing came about. Is at that time, and I realize this has changed, but my knowledge, and I'm going to disclose this, to my knowledge, at that time, I saw no evidence of Wayland doing anything.
Oh man, I'm totally with you, Matt. I
just didn't see it.
I had the clown show.
They are now.
Where we did 2 or 3 years of our yearly Linux predictions. Where okay, Wayland's going to ship this year,
right? Yeah,
totally, and it never happened. Right now, what I think did happen is it focused the supporters of Wayland into doubling down on what was actually already there. And Intel got more involved and started a dialogue with Red Hat, right? And they started working closer together to push Wayland forward. Driver manufacturers started thinking about it a little more. So I think even if the core amount of contributors maybe to Wayland hasn't gone up, or if it has, I don't know, but I definitely think it's moved things forward. And we just had a great, thanks to Heaven's Revenge in the Mumble Room, a great pre-show technical chat about the differences between Wayland and Mir. And it actually, I should get him to try to post it somewhere. But the summary is there's also some long-term architectural differences they're making. So we could see this conversation. I think a lot of us are kind of just expecting it to ship, and then we're going to stop talking about it. But I actually think once it ships, that's when the conversation's actually going to begin. We're going to look back at this pre-launch time stuff as adorable because
it's going to be just
exactly. In a couple of years, we're going to be living it, right? Or a year, I don't know. He says he backs it up there. He says 5 years of Wayland development showed that open source software development needs competition. Mir provided that, and Wayland has a lot more progress as a result. I'd say bring on X.12 too. Why not, James?
Right.
Yeah, man. Who needs X11 when you can have X12? There is a thing. All right, Matt. Well, I think I'm going to wrap us here. What do you think? Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
I think that's it. The one thing I would leave on, as far as Wayland's concerned, I'd want to leave everybody with this statement, is that when I made that statement initially, I was instantly given 101 reasons why, no, Wayland's developing just fine, and it doesn't need to speed up, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's interesting that, that happened. And of course, with the whole Mir thing happening, Wayland is, in fact, going really quickly, and it's doing amazing things, and it's coming along very nicely.
Well, and so, I think, what I kind of want the meta message of this episode to be is, the dialogue in the open source community actually does matter, because that's what encourages people to join open source projects. That's what motivates people. It gives people passion. That's why the news coverage and the media around Linux is actually more important than it is around these commercial companies that have dictators and commands from above, right? There's actually a larger impact Linux media can have. And in that same regard, there's a larger impact that competition has because it galvanizes each camp. It gets people focused, it gets people working, it gets people behind their effort, and it pushes things forward. And just like commercial competition helps commercial products, open source competition helps open source products. And yes, I think both Matt and I acknowledge there is plenty of opportunity for display server fragmentation, right? And
totally, yeah.
We could be going down an uncharted path and forfeiting one of the cornerstones of Linux stability thanks to X11 that we've had for years. But in the end, we might also see ourselves evolving into something that's pretty awesome. And with two folks going at it like this, now we got our Coke and Pepsi of display servers. They're going to be pushing each other forward, I hope, at least for a while, at least for quite a while. All right, Matt. Well, so I want to give people a little heads up if they've stayed tuned this long. This week on the Linux Action Show, Matt and I will be reviewing Cinnamon 2.0. Actually, I guess it's technically next week. But Cinnamon 2.0 has been out for a little while, and I've got it installed in a VM, and I've also got it installed on my Bonobes. And I think we'll give you our full take on it. I know there's a lot of folks out there who aren't quite happy with any particular desktop, and some of them are looking towards Cinnamon. I know we have some Mint 14 users in our Mumble Room right now. They're looking towards the next release of Mint with Cinnamon 2.0 and hoping that it's going in the right direction. So we'll give you our thoughts on the new version of Cinnamon in the next episode of the Linux Action Show.
Good stuff.
All right, well, I'm going to end us with the RMS wrap. So this was cut from this week's Coda Radio. It was put to the end of Coda Radio. Because during the show, about midway through the show, we had a Skype hiccup, and something happened, and Mike dropped off, and you hear me trying to reconnect to him throughout the song. And so I decided to kill time by taking a song I like from Ronald Jenkins called Sidetracked and pairing it with Richard Stallman, which It's two great things that go well together. It's like peanut butter and chocolate, Matt. So here you go. This is a clip from the end of this week's Coda Radio, and we'll end with this. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you right back here next week. Don't forget, you can email us. Just go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click that contact link, and choose Linux Unplugged from the drop-down. Also participate in our subreddit, linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and in our Mumble Room, which just go to jblive.tv on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, and you can get details on how to join our Mumble Room and be part of the dialogue. We are your internet lug. So just come and hang out with us and enjoy the RMS wrap. See you next Sunday, Matt.
See you then.
There's nobody else here, Chris.
You don't hear me? What are you talking about?
Christopher.
Oh, I hear you. You don't hear my wonderful beam? Or what about...
He's a jackass.
Do you hear that? Or do you hear...
I think it's wasted effort.
Or do you hear...
I think that we should all make those businesses fail.
It's the Stallman rap. Here it comes. Here it comes.
And the value of this is negative. And the value of this is negative. It's negative in the freedom dimension. I think it's wasted effort. Get it out of here. And the value of this is negative. I think that we should all make those businesses fail. Get it out of here. It's negative in the freedom dimension. It's negative in the freedom dimension. Get it out of here. Get it out of here. And the value of this is negative. It's negative in the freedom dimension. And the value of this is negative. Get it out of here. I think it's wasted effort. I think that we should all make those businesses fail. Get it out of here. Get it out of here. I think it's wasted effort. And the value of this is negative. And the value of this is negative. Get it out of here.
He's a jackass. He's a jackass. He's a jackass. Hello, everybody.
Get it out of here. Get it out of here. I think that we should all make those businesses fail. And the value of this is negative. And the value of this is negative. It's negative in the freedom dimension. And the value of this is negative. I think it's wasted effort. And the value of this is negative. I think it's wasted effort. I think that we should all make those businesses fail. It's negative in the freedom dimension. It's negative in the freedom dimension. I think it's wasted effort.
Hello, everybody.